This is a work of literary fiction. Except for some localities and historical facts, any resemblance to the locations, dates, events or character names cited herein are purely coincidental. The Dreams Girl Paradox. Love is strong as death. Songs of Solomon 8:6 warning. Contains language and graphic descriptions. With adult content. Preface. It was a challenge and a pleasure for me to write this intricate contemporary science fiction novel, 100% set in the state of Bahia Recôncavo, Brazil. A plot full of mysteries, sensuality, psychological and existential conflicts stemming from the manipulation of space-time and other parallel dimensions. Based on the ever-exciting and thought-provoking theme of time travel and alternative realities, the book will also address the advantages and disadvantages, as well as the ethical and technical implications of this feature on the characters' lives, against the backdrop of a past search and rescue. In this part of the story, follow with us the trajectory of Denny, a young man who works for the police of Murity, a small town in the Bahian Recôncavo, who finds himself in love with a young woman, Emmanuelle Machado, paradoxically kidnapped and killed 20 years ago. As he seeks answers to this and other puzzles that have suddenly come into his life from this mysterious fact, he finds that everything is connected to an enigmatic time machine installed on an old smartphone, and a date in 1999. KSZ Oliver. Have a good read. Chapter 1. Deja Vu. The fire crackled and lit up that dark and cold night. He was sitting, leaning against the trunk of a tree. Before him, huge flames of what appeared to be a fire. There was a beautiful girl in a black dress with her upper body on his lap. The weather was cold, but that warmth warmed the room in it. However, she did not move or react. He noticed a little smoke in the air. But his eyes apparently watered with the pain of loss. He was holding his small, cold body with one arm as he stared at a cell phone on the floor next door. The device had a video paused on the display. His nose itched and he felt like sneezing because of his allergic rhinitis. However, he ignored it. As he stroked her hair, he admired her beautiful little face. In his heart he experienced a mixture of revolt and guilt. He remembered the smile he knew and loved on that face, for the moment without life. Even knowing what should be done, he was still reluctant. Nevertheless, he concluded that he had no choice. He made a decision. In a rush, he picked up the phone and played the paused recording, pressing and holding one of the buttons on the phone then. The phone vibrated intensely in his hand. Dennison jerked awake, releasing the device he was holding. Fuck. He exclaimed, quickly grabbing her smartphone, which just didn't rush to the floor because before falling, in reflex he had closed his legs and made it stop in his lap. Taking the phone back, he found that there was no damage to it. He noticed that the device had just gone out, no power. Damn. I dozed off, was it? He wondered, a little bewildered, not sure what happened to him. Holy crap. What a weird dream. After being startled by the unexpected vibration, Denny noticed an intriguing detail. Everything was absurdly silent, almost like a vacuum. But it wasn't a vacuum, he breathed. Not that this state of calm was exactly new here. He was underground, and there he was calm by nature. But he assumed there was something more there. That seemed to be more than just silence. The workplace was still, or paralyzed, as it were. Immediately, he felt some kind of hollow hum in the air. He remembered when he put a shell to his ear, or was underwater. Denny thought it was just those situations where yawning is needed to balance the pressure in the ears. I'm not getting a little deaf, right? He wondered worriedly, scratching his ear with the little finger, but soon realizing that he heard his own voice. After being a little more relieved not to be deaf, it would not only be the lack of sound in the place that would catch his eye. Rising, he was struck by a few more details that he witnessed. The ceiling fan and wall air circulator had suddenly jammed. And he thought the lamp lights were kind of dim. Maybe it was some kind of power outage. He supposed. Denny didn't know if it was just in his head, but he noticed a certain smell of smoke in the air. Because of that, he wanted to sneeze. Smelling his clothes, he didn't notice any odor. He thought it was just on his mind. Finally, he believed it was all effects of sleep and tiredness that he felt he was experiencing that night. The bubble. His eyes were a little cloudy and watery. By rubbing them. Oh, shit. He reacted when she felt one of the lenses come out of her eyes. He still was not yet fully used to their continued use. Sometimes he forgot that he wore it. As he tried to put the lens back on, he planned to climb to the ground floor for a moment to relieve that itchy nose and huge, almost compulsive urge to sneeze. At that moment, even with one blurry eye, he seemed to be facing some kind of transparent film in front of him. Looking up, he saw that it stretched over and around him, like some kind of bluish bubble, or was it a translucent dome with it in? By putting the contact lens back on, he wanted to check if it was real. But he no longer noticed her there. He noticed only a slight breeze or air movement hitting him. At that time, he also felt the clarity of the place coming to his eyes. It was as if the lamps suddenly held all their light, as the sun's gravity retains its energy the first time it produces it. He also noticed noises of spinning propellers. It was the fans that started again. But it wasn't just that noise you heard. A boom bar bay, bar bar boom bar bb. Oh, damn it. You want to kill me from the heart, do you? He complained, putting his hand on his chest and holding onto one of the cabinets. There is no ghost here, right? He joked with what happened to relieve the tension of fright. He had been startled when he suddenly heard from the computer on his desk the introduction of the song, Under Pressure, by Queen. His heart pounding in surprise, he listened to the rest of the opening instrumental of one of his favorite songs. A boom bar bay, bar bar boom bar bb. Oh, damn it. You want to kill me from the heart, do you? He complained, putting his hand on his chest and holding onto one of the cabinets. There is no ghost here, right? He joked with what happened to relieve the tension of fright. He had been startled when he suddenly heard from the computer on his desk the introduction of the song, Under Pressure, by Queen. Her heart pounding in surprise, she listened to the rest of the opening instrumental of one of her favorite songs. A boom bar bay bar bar boom bar bb. A boom barbie pressure. Pushing down on me. Pressing down on you. No man asked for under pressure. Weird. He just said, analyzing what had happened there. After turning off the music, Denny was intrigued that, hearing this melody, he had the slight impression that he had lived it before. For him, except for those strange environmental phenomena, they were all memories of weeks before. So why was there, making the same tasks that day? He asked. Looking at the calendar, he saw that he was marking July 13, 2019. July 13th. No. Is it? He wondered, somewhat bewildered, still trying to situate himself, as if awakened in confusion. In view of that uncertainty about the exact notion of time, he told himself, you know this is ridiculous, right? Doubt the very reality you are seeing. If you have not realized, was almost asleep standing in that place, so tired. His subcontinent remembered. All right. He said, agreeing with himself, recognizing his physical condition at that time. It's all just sleep effects. He thought. How long did I really nap, huh? It seemed like for weeks. Denny wondered, once again feeling as if there was a kind of time lapse in his memory. After acknowledging that, strangely, his physical condition was not the best, he was already trying to end his overtime that weekend. Although he was very intrigued by all these events, as he could not explain them, he let it go. I was strangely discouraged to deal with it all that night. He argued everything he thought he saw. After all, I was drowsy with sleep and tiredness. He justified those strange events there. Denny. Dennison, or Denny, as they called him, was 29 years old and worked at the Recôncavo Police Department, based in Murity, a coastal town in Bahia. With 40,000 inhabitants, it was 120 kilometers from the capital, Salvador, and about half a km above sea level. So it was quite cold in winter. The city was named after indigenous people who initially inhabited that micro-region. It had something to do with a huge, almost homonymous palm tree called by the natives Murity. Also very present in the flora of the Atlantic forest, the tree was abundant in that area, when the city was just a small village, almost 100 years ago. He was a boy of medium height, normal physiognomy, and brown. He had dark, narrow eyes and dark brown hair, traits that had earned him the nickname, Chinese, in high school. But that characteristic was more related to myopia and due to indigenous traits, inherited from his mother. It worked in the administrative part of the municipal police station, a building that functioned in a kind of public services complex in the center. The site was a set of buildings built around the former police station, where had gathered the main public services, such as the forum, the registry and the city offices, besides the PD itself. Still in the PD. Under pressure. Looking at the PC clock, Dennison saw that it was past 9:20 p.m. The normal shift of his shift had already ended since 5 p.m. However, he had extended his activities into the night. Dennison digitized old county documents and files as part of a national program to create a central digital database. As the project was late on schedule, the federal government paid additional to those who produced more. Because of that, he decided that he would work overtime to increase his monthly income, and also accelerate the volume of service. But sometimes he got overworked. Almost 9:30. He had determined to work until 2200. Nevertheless, after that one involving the fright with the device vibrating in his hands, the things he had the impression of having seen in that room and, mainly, due to tiredness, he decided to anticipate his departure. This was all been a clear sign of his state of physical and mental wear. He suspected. As he headed for the vehicle in the PD yard, Dennison noticed that he was more than simply physically and mentally exhausted. He didn't know where he had spent so much energy that day. He seemed to have come from a war, or to have been beaten. He thought, massaging his aching shoulder muscles. His arms hurt too, and his rhinitis was triggered in a way that was only common in the presence of smoke, making his nose itch and trigger a runny nose. Only there was no smoke in the place. Or maybe, perhaps, he was just with low immunity. He also considered, well, I think I need to buy a vitamin supplement, then. He decided to self-medicate, as he always did. He realized that the state of his body's fatness was very reminiscent of the state he was in when performing some kind of heavy and prolonged work. If he were to make a diagnosis of the clinical condition itself, he would say that was under great psychological pressure and physical effort all that day. Which was strange, because it was only working from mid-afternoon that Saturday. He remembered. 9:37 p.m. Probabilities. Dennison was on his way home. Suddenly, changing the subject in his mind, he remembered what he supposedly dreamed during the nap in the DP, and the strange episode with the unexpected vibration of the cell phone. What a weird dream. He admitted, remembering whose face was the girl on his lap. He should probably be looking too hard at her pictures in those files. He acknowledged as he kept his tired eyes on the track. As he drove, he recalled the shock he had when the device vibrated in his hand without his having pressed a button, or received a call. Denny even thought he was getting a shock at the time. But he didn't remember having slept with the device in his hands. Thought. Besides, he mused, the smartphone wasn't in the socket, so it couldn't have been an electric shock either. He reconsidered. All you remembered, before you supposedly dozed off in his chair, was that you picked up your phone and made a video of yourself when you turned the front camera on by mistake. Interesting. He just said, after remembering the episode of the video recorded unintentionally. But that didn't seem like such a recent memory. It was as if he had been living for weeks, not that night. He had that particular impression. Dennison thought this was what they called déjà vu. However, he would see that this one, déjà vu, was not restricted to just the events in the basement of that police station. Around 9:40. While driving around the city, he also began to experience the faint feeling of having been to these places before. Not only having passed through these places, having already experienced and even thought about the fact that thought he had lived all that before. He noted strangely. What is it? Some kind of déjà vu to déjà vus, he asked jokingly, however, a little impressed. He remembered that in the basement of the department, the sensation he had upon awakening was that he was, or was, somewhere, seconds before waking up there. But aside from thinking it wasn't the first time, Denny would realize that those of his own impressions and repeated perceptions of events would not be the last, or the only ones. As he stopped the vehicle at a traffic light in front of a Baptist school, he watched people neatly pass the crosswalk. Suddenly, as if knowing what would happen next, he predicted, or remembered, that one woman would stumble over her own shoes and another would hurry back to get one of her pinscher dogs that had been left behind. And so it strangely occurred. What? But what the? He was surprised, looking back and forth, finding it all extremely unusual. Leaning over the wheel, he was thrilled with those so-called predictions. So he began trying to predict other possible actions and reactions from those passers-by. However, without much success that time. Denny had read, or rather watched, about the déjà vu on YouTube. He knew that, according to scientific explanations on the subject, it was a kind of delay in the transmission of images, in real time, from one side of the brain to the other. And this delay, of communication between the cerebral hemispheres gave the impression that those images, or scenes, were memories of the past. So, he realized that everything he thought he had predicted minutes before was just a simple episode of déjà vu, pure logical deduction, coincidence or mathematical probability, even. It was that, or he's just must have been going crazy, imagining things. He suggested. Around 9:50 p.m. on Saturday night. Be empty. Arriving home, he joked when entering. Honey, I'm here. But it is, I live alone. He remembered. No, offense, panther. You weren't exactly the ideal of female companionship I had in mind. He said to a black pet of the family that was meowing to meet him, and it grasped in his legs. It was a black cat of almost 9 years that his mother and sister left with him after living in Salvador. It had been donated to the family along with a brother identical to her, whose name was also Panther 1. However, he had died months later, poisoned. Probably by someone in the neighborhood who hated black cats, Denny suspected at the time. There were also many superstitious in the region who demonized those animals or used them in religious rituals. I already know why all this cuddle with me, want ration, right? The resemblance between you and some women is that you only approach us for interest. Denny talked to the pussycat while putting food in her plate. Not me, guys with money. He added. As he did so, a surprising sensation came to him, not just from a void in the room. It was as if, indeed, something was missing this time, or someone in that place. Denny felt exhausted. After feeding his cat, he went to the bedroom. There, he again experienced the same mysterious sense of loss. It seemed to be missing a piece of his life. Strangely noted for the second time. Not simply something, but it felt like a specific void. He noticed the lack of one person, someone in particular. Denny was weird all that. He could not explain. Once again, he put it all on account of the stress and tiredness he evidently experienced. Or, it was the so-called 30s crisis, something that had come early for him. He joked, figuring it was something every loner and bachelor in the 3.0s would eventually go through. It was about 11 a.m. The folder. After a shower and eating the only thing he could prepare, an instant noodle, he looked for his old cell phone and set it to recharge. After some time in the charger, he noticed that the device was abnormally hot. Even so, she managed to turn it on. Looking at the time, he saw that it was almost 11 o'clock. The old device seemed to choke and crash a lot in the processing of screen commands. And touch sometimes got too resistive. He assumed that fact was because it was a relatively old device and had little RAM. Because of that, he tired of waiting for the WhatsApp app to open. Already stressed, threw the phone on the nightstand. Fucking phone. He exclaimed, his eyes already tired. He knew that if he did not sleep soon, he would be dawning with black eyes and a weary countenance. He would have a horrible day if he woke up unwell. As if Monday itself already were the International Lazy Day. He joked. Meantime, he immediately realized something. Oh yeah. Tomorrow is Sunday. He remembered with relief, as he would rest. After tossing the smartphone on the nightstand, he noticed that the display was on and a command window had opened on the screen. The message asked if the user wanted to restart the system. Denny clicked OK, and left the device where it was. He knew that when it restarted, it would probably improve its operation and performance. Almost 11:45 at night. At the head of the bed was a folder containing copies of files from an old, unsolved police case. The inquiry involved a mysterious serial killer who acted in the Recôncavo region some 20 years earlier, and a young victim, a local student. It was a standard document folder, yellow and a little grubby to handle. Inside the cover, on the top edge and secured with a rusty metal clip, was a photograph of a beautiful, smiling young woman. The tag read, victim of kidnapping followed by murder, Emmanuelle Machado, 1999. Started flipping through it one more time. Meanwhile, without his paying attention, the device's display still on indicated that it was still in a continuous process of rebooting. It seemed to be in a state known as infinite system looping. After some time, realizing that situation, he took the smartphone. He recalled that this phone had been malfunctioning since trying to root his new operating system. He also noticed that the device was still quite hot. He assumed it was because he was plugged in, charging. Monday he will take it to his friend, the technical earthworm, to have a look. He planned it. Dennison even tried to go on analyzing the documents. He couldn't get so exhausted. He dozed off and woke up with the folder in his hands. After a few minutes, he saw that the device had finally restarted. At that moment, he noticed his cat climb on the sheet and nestle at the foot of his bed, pinning the edge of the blanket. A little sleepy, he even saw an unknown logo flashing on the smartphone's home screen before the system opened completely. His eyes were drowsy with sleep, but he could see it well before it vanished. He noticed it was an image made up of 4 uppercase and 3D letters, separated by dots. Viber. Dennison wondered. Or was it pronounced Viber? He suggested, before completely erasing from sleep. Denny was no longer conscious. For that reason, he didn't witness when something, like shockwaves, expanded beyond that room, like a silent explosion with the device at the epicenter. When spreading, those fumes ended up scaring the cat that jumped out of bed, but mysteriously did not fall to the floor, or anywhere. Soon after that rapid phenomenon, the whole fabric of reality rippled like disturbances on a river surface until it stabilized and returned to normal. But Dennison continued to sleep soundly, like a stone. Chapter 2. The Dream Girl. Denny seemed to be in the bathroom of his house. He was standing in the doorway when he spotted her climbing onto the bed and crawling over it. Her dress was slightly raised. Her button panties were teasingly on display. Certainly it was purposeful. He looked at him insinuatingly, as if inviting you to join her. Her face was even more beautiful when you played the sensual, he heard himself think. Dennison headed for the bed. In front of her, he held her hip and began to kiss her thighs from behind, slowly rising. He noticed that her pale hair was all bristling. She lay down a little, putting her head on a pillow and tilting her bottom. He caressed and kissed him, nibbling delicately. She was prone on the bed, trying to dispel the spasms of pleasure through her body. Denny, then, driven by a burning desire, knelt over her and turned her around. Then he grabbed her thighs, and pulled her to him. He completely took off her lingerie. Spreading her legs, he bent over, putting his head between them. He noticed small tremors in her hips in reflex to her stimuli. The girl moaned and panted with a smile and pleasure on her face. She then held his head there so it wouldn't stop. He listened to her restrained moans of pleasure as he relished that taste, sometimes slightly bitter, sometimes bittersweet in her mouth. At that time he woke up panting and heartbeat, having a pollution, and ejaculation during sleep. Denny was panting as he felt his heart pounding. The impression he had upon awakening was that he was there. Or that she was there with him. Wow. But what was that? What was that really? Exclaimed to himself, after realizing that he had had an erection and ejaculated during that erotic dream. Damn it. Dennison was impressed by the extremely real scenes and sensations he experienced. It looked so real. He was amazed. Turning on the light, saw that the cat was still sleeping at his feet. So, Panther. How about taking a license? He said, pulling the sheet under her, wanting to get up to go to the bathroom. The cat was huddled and sleeping soundly. It was perfectly nestled like a coiled snake with its paws over its ears. Denny was careful not to wake her up. However, she awoke. By looking at him. The animal reacted instinctively to see him, seemingly scared. Hey hey hey. Are you freaking out, Panther? Are you scared, kitty? Denny exclaimed, also scared by the sudden behavior of the pet to his person. His animal continued, the cat facing Denny, visibly unaware of him. Then he jumped out of bed and fled the room quickly. He has gone mad. Denny said, not understanding at all what happened to his animal. Damn. There's no ghost here, right? He joked with that popular belief where animals would supposedly see supernatural things. Looking at the clock on his smartphone, he saw it was around 4:40 in the morning. After the surprise with what happened to the cat, she resumed processing the content of that dream. For a moment Denny still had the feeling that he was actually there with this young woman. It even seemed to taste her intimacy in her mouth. Her scent and warmth were alive in his memory. It had been a unique experience. He just didn't know how to explain. Never before had he had such a dream. So realistic. It was as if it had been torn from there when he woke up. Noted. Now I fantasize about dead girls, is it? He was amazed, immediately remembering where he knew that young woman. Man, it seems that I really need a woman. Denny admitted, already getting up. I'm so needy, I'm even dreaming about dead women. He murmured as he headed for the bathroom. Dennison remembered that sometimes it was common for him to ejaculate when he had an erotic dream. Especially in the months following the end of his old relationship. But that was due to involuntary sexual abstinence. And it hasn't happened in years. He remembered. Denny admitted that although he had already had a certain obsession with that girl before, he didn't remember having feelings or desires for her. Concerned, he wanted to know what was happening to him at last. However, he recognized that lately he had been with that face in mind. Since studying this case more thoroughly a few months ago, it has become more than an obsession with him. For this reason, he concluded that his unconscious only used that girl's face to illustrate her fantasies and relieve her latent sexual tension. Even after all this self-explanation, he could not deny that there was anything slightly wrong or different with him. However, despite the unusual and quite disturbing dream, he chose to treat that episode only as an isolated fact. But once, he did not realize the pattern. Or pretended not to notice. He decided to ignore it all, arguing that it was just that time. It was that explanation, or else. His lonely life should be making him a little crazy. He joked. Almost 5 o'clock in the morning. Back in bed, he found that the smartphone had started after he slept. Still on the home screen, saw that it was 4:49 in the morning. While sleep did not return, it inevitably came back to thinking about the vivid details and sensations so real that he experienced during that last dream. It was not as if he was just dreaming, but remembering, or reliving those scenes. He compared again. They were real memories lived, not fantasies. Noted, undeniably still shaken by the very real images of that young woman's body. Denny was very intrigued by this episode. It was not much to give balls to dreams or even to give them special, or spiritual, meaning, as his mother did. However, he could not help admitting that it had been a dream quite different from all he has ever had so far. Suddenly, Denny noticed something strange happening to him. He couldn't say how, or where all those strange images came from, as if they were parts of lost memories. But the fact is that he noticed something triggering in his mind, like if they were fragments of a recent past. They were bits of supposed memories that suddenly began to invade her head as if they had always been there. As if he had suffered from some sort of selective amnesia all that time, and just then, he was beginning to remember those so-called images. How could he have so many memories with a dead girl in his head? He wondered a little disturbed before falling asleep again, thinking that these were just mere fantasies, or traces of the dream he had just had. The dead girl. The girl of his dreams, which he referred to as the dead girl, was Emmanuelle Machado, one of the victims of the maniac of virgins impersonator, a serial killer who terrorized the Recôncavo during the 80s. She had been a senior high school student at Murity, the polyvalent state college. She was kidnapped the day before the graduation party on the same school grounds on November 26, 1999. 3 days later, his body had been found on the banks of the BR-101 highway, dirty and mutilated, his heart ripped out. To the police of the time, the suspect of the crime was known as Maniac of Virgins. To Denny, however, he was a copycat of that killer. This imitator possibly acted between the years 97 and 2000. Like the original, he also killed 10 people. Unlike its predecessor, this one from the 90s was never caught. And according to the survey, the 80s maniac was still in prison at a psychiatric ward in the capital. He was nicknamed this because he had a peculiar pattern. He only kidnapped beautiful, blonde, and virgin girls. He had the fetish of strangling the victims to death and then dressing them in a wedding. But his main signature was to rip the hearts of his victims. The coroners pointed out that the sexual violations occurred post-mortem. The suspect was a species of necrophile and had some sort of fixation with apparently virgin girls and with specific biotype, hence the nickname, Maniac of Virgins. The imitator, who was officially treated as a possible accomplice to the Maniac of Virgins by the official investigators of the case, followed the same modus operandi as the original killer. The police just didn't know if they had the same motivation. According to the records, the suspect of the 80s began to commit the crimes after being rejected by a girl with the same description of his victims, beautiful, blonde and virgins. Biotype that became the focus of his revenge. The alleged accomplice would have continued with the murders in the 1990s after the arrest of the main killer. The appointment of impersonator for the accomplice came after Denison reviewed the inquiry into the case of the murder of Emmanuelle Machado a few months ago. Well, at least it was with these details that he still remembered the case and went to sleep that night. Reminders, weird reminders. Denny opened his eyes slowly. The June festivities had been over for almost a month, but the July weather was still very cold and rainy. That day was perfect to stay in bed, rolled up. He wondered. Lying in bed, he stared up at the ceiling, noting that those strange and disturbing images that had sprung to his mind after the dream had not left him, but they were bulging. Again, he reiterated that they really were as memories, as he had noticed at dawn. Not only that, they seemed relatively recent. He once again realized, but trying to ignore them, not wanting to give them importance. Denison also realized that some of those pseudo-memories seemed to be theirs here, in that house. It couldn't be real memories because he has never been with that person before. Neither could, she was dead. Denny reacted, scratching his sleep eyes again. Suddenly, rubbing his eyes, he realized that he had slept wearing his contact lenses. Do you want to go blind, damn it? He scolded, getting up quickly to check to see if they were both in place. After removing them and pouring them into a glass of liquid at the head of the bed, lying down, he tried to go back to sleep. Back in bed, he analyzed every detail of that mysterious erotic dream about that victim from the police archives. As hard as he tried, he couldn't get the images of her face out of his head. Not just those, but many others that came to her trail. Again, strangely, he had them as bits of memories, of situations lived with her. He was also surprised when he realized that those supposed imagined images, or not, were loaded with something he didn't know how to explain, feelings of affection for that late young from Murity. However, he also remembered that he always had a very fertile imagination. For this reason, he believed that possibly this was all the result of his imaginative capacity, added to the emotional need he lived in. Neediness that she had undergone years before. They would soon disappear. Denny predicted. He believed that this was all just because of loneliness and did not admit, or did not want to accept, that any other factor was involved in this issue. He was alone for a long time, with no lasting relationship. Those so-called fantasies could just be a reflection of that. He just didn't understand how those dreams of a homicide girl fit into this picture. Would he be so needy at that point? He worried. Still in bed, he remembered the first and strange dream he had with that girl in the PD, where she seemed to be on his lap in the face of a fire. With that, would be the second with the figure of that girl, in only 1 day and a half. He wondered. Thinking of that recurrence of dreams with the image of that beautiful young woman, he remembered what Freud said, that dreams are the fulfillment of desires. Nonetheless, he did not remember having sexual desires for corpses or by murdered female figures. He observed. In view of this, a providential article about dream psychology that he read on the internet, which dealt with that psychological phenomenon, also came to mind. According to the article, if you repeatedly dreamed of the same theme or characters, it could mean that your subconscious was trying to tell you something important. Or it pointed to some sort of unfinished business from the past. But it could also have something to do with some days happening, or the last thing you thought about intensely before bed. Despite that logical explanation that he arranged, however, he nevertheless continued to notice that the images involving that maniac victim strangely still seemed to him more like a kind of memory in his mind than with a dream itself. In the end, he concluded that, since he had been fiddling with his cell phone and thinking about that girl's case before falling asleep, those activities ended up influencing the content of his dreams. So, like the déjà vu from the road, Dennison ruled out any possibility that this event meant anything more special than it should, or could be. Chapter 3. The Lapse. After checking the cell phone, he found that the phone had fully charged and was working. Which was good news. He remembered that, in addition to maintaining an inexplicable affection for this device, he was still paying for his vehicle and had debts on his card for house renovations. So he couldn't afford to buy another smartphone right now. He would have to use that one until he couldn't. He realized. As soon as he put the phone back on the nightstand, he quickly got it back, thinking he didn't see what he thought he saw at that moment. What? Today is not Monday, it's Sunday. He remarked, seeing the wrong cell phone date. He deduced that it was due to the fact that the device had completely discharged. Denny tried to make the correction. But, even in automatic time zone update mode, it still appeared as Monday, July 15, 2019. How is Monday, if yesterday was Saturday, damn. Denny fumed, thinking it is one of the failures of the smartphone. He went to his notebook. Would use it as a reference and update the time manually. Holy shit. It had a power outage, was it? Or was it the net that went down? He wondered, confused, checking the same day and time on the notebook. July 15th. Seriously. I don't think so, buddy. I didn't sleep for 24 or 36 hours. He said, convinced of what he saw, laughing at that unusual fact. Updated the date on the computer and mobile too, delaying one day. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning. Panther. But where did this cat get in, huh? Denny walked around the house, looking for his cat to feed her. He didn't find her. It struck her that she wasn't disturbing him at this hour to feed, as she always did. He thought she must have slept outside. There was a little door at the base of the service area door where she could come and go as she pleased. He remembered that she had exhibited this unusual behavior at dawn while sleeping at the foot of his bed, as usual. Denny thought it might have been because he had suddenly awakened her. Denny then returned to the room. He picked up the phone and dialed a number. Hello, Mum. He greeted his mother, putting it on speaker. Is everything okay, Dennison? Apparently she was surprised by that call. Yes, of course. Why wouldn't he be? He also surprised that reception. So. How are you? He asked. It had been almost 7 years since he lived alone. Mrs. Natalia, a 52-year-old lady, moved to the capital along with her youngest daughter, Denny's sister, when she went to study ophthalmology in Salvador. In the first year, they decided to continue there definitely. At first he visited him almost every month. Then only a couple of times a year. But he always called on Sundays to know how he was doing. Or vice versa. It's okay, really. Yes, of course. Why, again, the question. He didn't understand that insistent concern. I don't know. Calling me today, like this. She still seemed strange. But I always call, remember. What's up, Denny? Is something happening? I'm feeling you different. His mother asked, in a tone of surprise. What do you mean, different? You're going out with a girl, aren't you? Her mother implied, this time excited. Why the question? Denny didn't understand the direction that led the conversation. I don't need to be there to see it in your face. She confessed. This what? That there is a girl in your life. I'm very happy, son. No, I'm not seeing anyone, okay. He denied. That's it, or. She seemed to remember another hypothesis but decided to insist on the first one. Or. He wanted to know what the alternative was but she didn't inform at first. Never mind. It's nothing. His mother just answered. His mother supposed he didn't want to reveal in that moment who was the mysterious girl he was dating. Dennison had kind of cut himself off from a strong love disappointment that he still suffered from school days. Everything after a former classmate and girlfriend, the first girl he fell in love with, cheated on him. That fateful episode of the past still affected him. He was one of those men who still believed in the spontaneity of the birth of reciprocal feelings among people. So he fled the suggestions of arranged encounters that her mother arranged for him. He still dreamed of some kind of love at first sight. But it was kind of hard for any of those things to happen to him, since he rarely left home. Mrs. Natalia knew about his emotional trauma. She kept hoping he would get over the episode and meet someone one day. but for years that had been rather unlikely, since he had not known anyone for a long time. Denny even partially acknowledged that he had a problem in that regard. However, he refused to accept any help or suggestion to overcome it. He didn't like or couldn't share her pain and emotions with anyone. Not with the family. Extremely reserved, he kept everything deep, and to himself. Emotionally, he was a black box. So who is she? Is someone from work? Insisted her mother on suspicion of the mysterious girlfriend. It was time for a woman right there in this house. She suggested. Maybe now stop eating instant noodles every night. What if a woman doesn't know or doesn't want to cook? He asked, making his mother laugh on the other side. Is there really a girl then? She thought she confirmed her suspicions. Mommy, I already said you don't have any. He gave up trying to convince her. How is Isabel doing with the course of ophthalmology? He tried to change the subject. Tell her the cat keeps eating like a pig. He jokingly. Have you got another cat? Asked his mother, apparently surprised. No. I'm talking about Panther, the same old eater. He clarified. Have you been taking your medicine properly, son? She asked him suddenly, surprising him with the strange question. Huh. Medicine. What medicine? He asked, apparently not knowing what she was talking about. Yes, your medicines. She confirmed. I know sometimes you may think you're fine, and you don't need it anymore, but... Mommy, I really don't know what medicine you're talking about. He interrupted her, reiterating his denial and ignorance of that innuendo. Denny, is something happening I don't know? No, Mum, nothing's happening to me, okay. Reiterated. Is everything all right with you? Yes. And you needn't worry. He reiterated. Okay. And when are you coming right here, huh boy? You haven't come to see your sister in almost 6 months. She complained. What do you mean? I haven't seen Isabel in almost 6 months. Asked Dennison, surprised by that statement. I was there last month. He remembered. Here in Salvador. Not. What do you mean, in Salvador? No. Then, with you, yes. Don't you remember? He confirmed. So I wasn't home, she argued firmly. Denny seemed to have no idea what she was talking about. In his mind, he was absolutely certain that she had visited her mother and sister on a recent trip to the capital. For that reason, he didn't understand why she suggested another visit from her, as if it had been a while since they had seen him, for 6 months, to be more exact. However, he did not want to insist on the subject. Maybe, Mum was getting a little forgotten about things. He considered deciding to ignore those little incongruities on her part. However, later on, he would discover that those minor inconsistencies between his respective versions of the facts would foreshadow much deeper changes in his perception of life, world, and reality. And how are you doing at work? Are you in PD now? No. Today is Sunday, remember, Mum. He reminded her, thinking he was really right to suspect that something was wrong with his mother's perception of time. Sunday. Dennison, have you really been taking your medications? Asked his mother, serious, catching his attention. No, because there is no medicine to take. Once again showed him not knowing what she was talking about. Denny, today is Monday. She told him, worried about what she was hearing. Monday. He replied, doubting that and convinced that something was wrong with his mother. Yes, Monday. Her mother reaffirmed. No. Today is Sunday, Mother. He said, still convinced. If yesterday was. He did not complete, remembering something that occurred to him earlier. Yesterday was. She did not understand. Quite confused by that sudden information from Mrs. Natalia, he still wanted to believe that his mother had just been wrong. However. So today is not Sunday. Are you sure? He suddenly began to doubt his version. Yes, I have. She confirmed. Ah, damn it. He reacted after remembering the dates he thought were wrong on his cell phone and notebook. Denny picked up the remote control at the foot of the bed and quickly turned on the bedroom TV. What is going on here? He was startled after turning on the television and seeing that the programs were not of Sunday programming. Pulling the notebook close to him, he checked some local and national news portals. What? It can't be. This is not possible. He was surprised. On a website that showed the official day and time, Denny leaned back against the headboard and ran a hand through his hair, puzzled. It turned out to be July 15, 2019. What the hell happened to me yesterday? I mean the day before yesterday. What does it mean? I slept for more than a day. He said, sitting on the bed, with the cell phone beside and his mother still in line. You want to tell me what's going on there, Mr. Dennison? Mrs. Natalia demanded an explanation, already extremely worried about her son by that time. No, not at all, Mum. He answered, taking the phone back. It's nothing. No, Mum. It's bullshit of mine. Don't worry, okay. It was just a lapse here, okay. You know how it is every Monday, right? Lazy day, and all. He tried to disguise, already jumping out of bed quickly. Dennison, do I have to go to Murity to see you? She offered, still worried. No. Of course not, Mum. No need, okay. It's all right here, okay. He wanted to take her away from that idea. Shit. Muttered Denny after checking the time. Mum, I have to hang up. I'm late. I love you. Goodbye. He said, half-heartedly, hurrying. But how did that happen to me?